point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 573rd edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. Tom is not in this week. I was unable to contact him, so I'm hoping he's okay. He hasn't been in the show for over a month, as those of you who have been watching are aware. Tom is getting old. Not that I'm not getting old, it's just that, it's hard for him to prepare for this show at an advanced age. So, this show is news items from my blog, geoharvey.com. You can go there, look at click on the calendar for the dates that we're covering. We're starting on the 9th of May, and we'll go up to, I guess, the 15th. That sounds right, is it? Is it? Yeah, it is. From the 9th of May to the 15th of May, and I'll try to keep you alert to what date it is. You can go to geoharvey.com, click on the calendar. It'll give you about 15 items that you can look through for the particular item that you want to, news item that you want to read, and you can click on the link there to go to it, or you can go lower on the screen now and find couple of links. One opens a website that Tom and I always used to prepare for the show. It only has the materials that I'm going to be bringing up. The other one is a file of the same thing that you can download. So we're starting with an item from News Channel 3-12. I'm going to put this up. Goleta City facilities move to 100% renewable energy. The city of Goleta, which is in California, is poised to meet and exceed municipal renewable energy goals earlier than expected. The Goleta City Council unanimously approved powering all city facilities with 100% clean renewable energy through the city's community choice aggregator starting in July. This is something that, why should we care about Goleta aside from the fact that it's an example of an American municipal place. Basically, that's exactly why it's in the show. Is over and over again, city municipal organizations decide that it's time to move to renewable energy, and they do. Now, the fact that the city council decided this doesn't mean everybody in the city is doing it. It means that the city is buying just renewable energy for its own facilities. Some towns and cities have gone to 100% renewable energy, Greenfield, Massachusetts being one, just down the road from us. And the people in Greenfield, for example, get renewable energy by default when they buy electricity. They can get out of that, but if they don't want renewable energy, it costs them extra to get whatever else is available. Okay, we're going to go on. We have a couple of disturbing stories this week. This one is from Clean Technica, and we are still on the 9th of May. The title of this particular story is "A Surge in Sea Level Rise Threatens Southern States." Sea levels in the Gulf of Mexico have risen 6 inches or more in the past 10 years, Most oceanographers expected that amount of change would not happen until the end of this century, and only if global warming is to surpass 2 degrees Celsius. Scientists are scrambling to determine the cause. Now, my bet on this is that the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional, I forget, but it's the circulation system that involves the Gulf Stream. My bet is that that is slowed down, and the result is that the water in the Gulf is not leaving the Gulf as easily as it had in the past. And if that's correct, then the Gulf Stream will not slow down much more, I'm guessing. It's a guess. But six inches is a lot of rise, especially when you consider places like New Orleans, and much of the coast of Louisiana. This picture is Fort Myers Beach, Florida. And if you look at that, 6 inches of rise is going to make a difference. And especially considering that Governor DeSantis has said that they are deprioritizing climate change. This came through today. Climate change is no longer a priority for Florida, which puzzles me amazingly because they're spending so much money to deal with the damage. But, that's the way people are. So, our next item, let me put this up. This is a picture of a pivotal helix light eVTOL. eVTOL is electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle. This is also from Clean Technica. The title is Got $200,000 and Want to Fly Electric? This lightweight eVTOL ships in July and does not require a pilot's license. I'm sure that there are scads of you who are just going to run out and place an order this afternoon, or maybe not. Let me read the synopsis. For about $200,000, you might be able to attain the ultimate in e-mobility early adopter status. The Pivotal Helix eVTOL is available for order in the United States with deliveries starting in July, and you will not need a pilot's license. Maybe you don't need a pilot's license, but you certainly need common sense. I'm going to go on. We're up to Friday, May 10th, and we have a picture here of San Francisco. This picture is from 2020, and this is a picture of San Francisco during fires that were going on out west when the city was being invaded by a cloud of smoke. And of course, at this point, I don't know what it is, whether it's sunset, sunrise, whatever it is that's coloring the entire sky, but obviously this is not good. This is from Clean Technica. The title is 2.5 degrees Celsius is now the best case scenario, climate scientists tell The Guardian. Recently, The Guardian reached out to every lead author or review editor of IPCC reports since 2018 to ask them how the fight against global warming is going. Of 380 people who responded, many expect climate havoc to unfold in coming decades. Now, this is the reason why this thing that's been going on among climate scientists is the reason why we have been hearing about geoengineering a lot in the last couple of months, because people are getting very afraid. I want to point out that geoengineering is not the only thing that could be invoked to stop this. For example, I have been seeing news come through that talks about putting the United States and much of the world on a wartime footing to deal with climate change. And that is something that just doesn't have much resonance for a lot of people because they really don't understand what it means. In my generation, I was born in 1946, just after the Second World War ended. And I didn't experience the rationing in the Second World War, but I did experience a lot of people talking about rationing in the Second World War. And I want you to understand, sugar was rationed. You had a certain amount of sugar you could buy, and that was it. Canned milk was rationed. You wouldn't be able to get it unless you had a child who was very young. Gasoline was rationed. You had a certain amount of gallons of gasoline a week. And my recollection is a family was allowed to have 3.5 gallons of gasoline a week. More shocking to a lot of people is the fact that for almost the entire war, it was not possible for an American to buy a new car. The wartime approach, the wartime footing, meant that new cars could only be made for government entities. And, that meant for the Army, and it meant for specific purposes that had to do with police cars, for example. Ordinary people could not buy them. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that was rationed was tires. Not that you couldn't buy new tires, you were not allowed to have, as a family, more than 5 tires. A car, 4 tires, plus a spare. That's all you were allowed to have. One car. If you had 4 cars, 3 of them were going to have to be up on blocks because they couldn't have tires under them. And that, if we put the United States on that kind of footing, the President of the United States could just say, okay, we're not going to be manufacturing any more internal combustion engines for vehicles, period. And that would be that. Do I think that, that would be acceptable to all Americans? Absolutely not. But at some point, we're going to have to be serious about what is going on with climate change. And I don't know what point that is, but my suspicion is, as I'm seeing things, something is going to happen that terrifies a lot of people. And if it hasn't been seen by those people already, it will soon. It will be soon. So I don't think this idea of 2.5 degrees being the best scenario is necessarily correct. We'll just have to see. Anyway, the next thing up is a picture of a solar site, which is courtesy of Queequeg Renewables. And this is from Renewable Energy Magazine. The title is Companies Partner to Boost Biodiversity at UK Renewable Energy Sites. 2 companies are working together on 5 solar plus battery projects in the UK to ensure that each site meets its biodiversity net gain targets. The targets require improvements in habitat as part of the Environment Act of 2021 that came into force this year. This obviously is in the UK, and that Environment Act 2021 is a UK law, but they're pushing the idea that they want solar power to be put in, and they want the environment around that solar power to be put onto a status that is as advantageous for renewable energy as possible. So we'll just see how that works. Okay, the next item that comes up is we have a picture of an Eli Zero. Get that up. This is an Eli Zero. This is from Clean Technica. The title of this is Eli opens reservations for its $12,000 zero electric micro car in the United States. That car that you're seeing there is scheduled to be sold for $12,000. If you've been waiting for a super cheap EV that can handle all your driving needs, You're in luck. Eli Electric Vehicles is taking reservations in the United States for its flagship vehicle, the $12,000 Zero microcar, and sales are expected to begin in the third quarter of this year. So basically what they're saying here is that sometime September, October, November, that's actually not the third quarter. I would guess it's July, August, September. July, August, September. Sometime in July, August, and September, this vehicle is supposed to be on the market for $12,000. And I'll tell you something, that's remarkably cheap when you consider all things. I have seen electric bicycles for prices that approach $12,000. And I've seen a lot of other things. I've never seen an electric skateboard that went that high, but there are a lot of things out there that are expensive, and this is designed to be cheap. Now, I don't know offhand much about it. My guess is that it seats 2 people, and it'll carry you and your groceries maybe. And it will probably have a very short range. I should have looked this up immediately before the start of this show, and I'm sorry that I didn't. But if you go to Clean Technica and look at this, it'll give you that information. Okay, our next item up has a picture of Donald Trump. We're up to Saturday, May 11th, and this is an article from Clean Technica. The title is "Trump Promises Oil and Gas Execs Free Rein if they put $1 billion into his campaign." I'm going to take that off because it's kind of unsettling to see that guy. At a Mar-a-Lago meeting with fossil fuel executives in April, Trump suggested they get together and donate $1 billion to get him reelected. Giving $1 billion would be a deal, Trump said, because of the taxation and regulation they would avoid. In other words, if they give him that amount of money, he'll do everything he possibly can as quickly as he possibly can to make sure that they are not tied into a situation where they're not going to make a lot of money. And he's saying that if they put $1 billion into being nice to him, he would give them benefits that would be worth more than $1 billion. And this is honestly something that I don't find surprising. I have seen people comment on it and they say, yeah, it does sound like it might be illegal. And but the lawyers that I had heard commenting on this say, no, it's not illegal. This is a political activity and it's not illegal. I will point one thing out, and that is that this offer was made in April at Mar-a-Lago at a meeting of oil and gas executives, and somebody at that meeting spilled the beans. I'm not altogether sure why that person spilled the beans, but they wanted everybody to know that Donald Trump had told people this. And I think what that means is that there are people unfriendly to that idea in that industry, which is somewhat heartening, not terribly surprising, all things considered. Okay, this is an interesting graph. It shows the European electricity generation by source, and it goes from 2015 to 2024. And if you look at this graph, you'll see that the black area at the bottom, which represents coal, has been declining. The gray area above that has been kind of lurching about, but not growing. The area above that gray area, by the way, is gas. Other fossil fuels are not increasing. Nuclear is, I would say, if anything, declining, but not markedly. Hydro is basically up and down with the weather. Bioenergy Solar. Solar is the second thing from the top, and it is definitely growing, although it goes to peaks in the summer and lows in the winter. And at the top, you've got wind, which is definitely growing. This is a map of what I just described. The article here comes from Yale E360. And the title for the article is Coal and Gas Supplied Just 21% of Europe's Power Last Month. Together, coal and gas generated only 21% of electricity in the European Union last month. The build-out of wind and solar in Europe is continuing apace, while hydropower is recovering from an extended drought. These sources produced 49% of electricity in the European Union in April, according to data from Ember. Now, there's a couple of things to point out here, and one of them is Russia invading Ukraine was an extraordinary action in terms of its effect in the energy in the world of energy, in the energy market, because the European countries, with a couple of exceptions, have turned away from Russia as a supplier of oil, coal, and gas. Now they're turning away as a supplier of nuclear fuel. And that is really kind of appallingly bad for Russia, because 2/3 of its export value was fossil fuels, and so their exports have been cut dramatically. Personally, I think the reason why that war started was because Vladimir Putin saw the handwriting on the wall, knew that their fossil fuel dominance was being threatened, and unless they did something to convince the Europeans to buy more from them, they were going to be out of luck, because almost all of the European countries are talking about huge declines in their spending for fossil fuels. Now things are far worse for Russia, because the Europeans have increased the speed at which they're doing the changeover, so that they are less dependent on Russia. The invasion of Ukraine was timed to happen just as Germany was shutting down its nuclear power plants. And it happened that the Germans kept their nuclear power plants open a little bit longer than they would have in order to deal with that. But the timing of this war was, I believe, just aimed at trying to make the Europeans more dependent. And that's one of the problems with oil and gas and fossil fuels, is that they pose a security risk, because they require, in most countries, a constant input in terms of importing coal, gas, and oil. The same thing is true of nuclear power. Many countries can provide themselves with all the solar, wind power that they need, and so things are a little different for those countries that have renewable energy. The next picture here, this is a picture of Maui, and the caption on this is "Maui, not a good place for a drought." And if you look at that picture, you can see why. There is a lot of grass that can be dried. The hillsides can be dried. The forests can be dried. If those things happen during a drought and something catches fire, that fire might be very, very hard to fight. And those hillsides in the background are just an example of where that is. This particular article comes from ABC News, and the title is "Hawaii Officials Outline Efforts to Prevent More Devastating Wildfires Ahead of a Dry Season." As Maui continues to recover from the deadliest U.S. wildfire in over a century, Hawaii officials are looking for preventing more disasters. Climate change has been causing more drought in Hawaii, and wildfires, once rare there, are happening more frequently. So this is something that, the Hawaiian government is very much aware of the fact that they've got to act in order to prevent an increase in wildfires and keep things kind of under control, both for preventing the wildfires and for dealing with them once they break out. Okay, we're up to Sunday, May 12th. We have a picture of solar panels in New Zealand. Not that New Zealand is a particularly important place in this article, but it is a representative place. The title, this is from a publication called The Express Tribune. The title for the article is Solar Prices Drop Up to 25%. Solar prices in Pakistan, that's where the article is really kind of centered, have dropped by 15 to 25% due to widespread imports and increased supply relative to consumption in the country. Market sources suggest that one reason for the decrease in the prices of solar panels is the halt in imports of solar panels from China to the United States, the European Union, and India. Now, it has been clear that the Chinese government is subsidizing its solar panels, and according to other nations, those subsidies are in violation of treaties. And so the United States, the European Union, and India have all put increased tariffs on solar panels from China. The United States, I think the panels in the United States, if they don't already have them, will have an increase by 100%, which means that China is no longer selling as many solar panels in the United States, Europe, and India as it had been. This, from the Pakistani point of view, is a huge advantage because it means that the Chinese are more interested in getting rid of solar panels than they had been. So they're selling them at reduced rates in places like Pakistan. And that may have an important effect worldwide. Okay, we are up to an item from Clean Technica. Let me put this picture up. These are a pair of Volvo electric trucks. And the title for this article is More Electric Trucks Coming to the United States, but China Still Leads. In the United States, the transition to electric trucks is picking up speed, especially in Southern California. That is an area where the majority of products manufactured from foreign countries enter the United States, and the exhaust from all those diesel trucks in the area is a really oppressive burden. So what's happening here is that the trucking industry in Southern California is extremely active because of the imports into the United States from other parts of the world. And in Southern California, that's going to include practically any place in Asia. And that, by the way, includes the Philippines. It'll include Australia. It's going to include much of South America, and may include large parts of Africa. Anything that is facing toward that Pacific shore of the United States is likely to be imported through Southern California. The result of that is that you have a lot of trucks active in that area with a lot of exhaust fumes, and those trucks are increasingly being replaced by trucks that have electric motors powering them. So that is something that we could be aware of and grateful for, actually. Okay, the next item on this list we have a picture of a small area in Afghanistan. When I think of Afghanistan, this is not the idea that comes to mind. I think of plains that are flat, but the fact is, much of Afghanistan is mountainous. This is from ABC News. That ABC in this case is American Broadcast Company. The title of the article is "Flash Floods Kill Hundreds and Injure Many Others in Afghanistan." Flash floods from unusually heavy seasonal rains in Afghanistan have killed more than 300 people and destroyed over 1,000 houses. The World Food Program said. The UN agency said it is distributing fortified biscuits to survivors of one of the floods that hit Afghanistan. So basically what's happening here is that certain areas of Asia are getting hit by, and this is true, of course, all over the world. Certain areas are being hit by very heavy rains, which result in flooding. Other areas happen to be hit by droughts, and it's kind of difficult to figure out what's actually going on with some of these things, but that is what's going on, the areas that are being hit by droughts and floods. This picture shows mountains, obviously, and it shows farm fields by a river. And if that river floods, those fields will be flooded. I'm reminded of Alstead, New Hampshire, driving through there one week several years ago and seeing a farm field which, as I recall, might have been filled with corn. And the next week going through, and that farm field was just a large field with rocks in it. The soil had been completely washed away. That is one of the things that can happen for floods. This area that you're seeing in the picture could be devastated by a flood, and that water that's around it is not exactly low. Okay, the next item that we have has a picture of a solar farm in Portugal. This comes from Muffin, Muffin. Okay, this is from Renew Economy, which, as I recall, is an Australian, I should put that back up, an Australian publication. The title is "Renewable Energy Averages 95% Share in Portugal in April." Pardon me. The first 4 months of 2024 saw, quote, "historic," end quote, levels of renewable energy generation in Portugal, culminating in an historic 94.9% of consumptions, rounds to 95, being met by renewables in April. It is the fourth consecutive month that has seen renewable energy values cover over 80% of demand. Well, Portugal is one of the countries in Europe that has a large part of its electricity coming from renewable energy. They have been putting up solar farms, such as this one that you saw. There is a solar farm in Portugal, and wind farms, and they have a certain amount of hydro also. Now, the next item that we're doing is from Clean Technica, and it is accompanied by a graph. And this is really kind of an amazing graph. This is from African EV is the name of the source of the graph. And it shows the cost to drive 100 kilometers, which I think that's about 62 miles, in Ethiopia as of the 15th of January 2024. And I want to point out here, we have a bunch of values on this chart that are at 12 cents or lower. And then we have, all the way to the right is one that's 14 cents. And then we have a bunch of items in the chart that range from $7.03 to $22.22. So what's the difference? The ones that are 14 cents or lower are electric vehicles. The ones that are $7.03 to $22.22 are powered by fossil fuels. And this, as I said, is from Clean Technica. The title of the article is Ethiopia Shows Us Just How Fast the Transition to Electric Mobility Can Happen in Africa. Ethiopia had a 10-year target to see 148,000 electric cars and close to 50,000 electric buses on Ethiopia's roads by 2030. Now, 2030 is 16 years, 17 years from now. Am I right? No, I'm not. It's 6 or 7 years from now. What am I thinking? It has made amazing progress. The Ministry of Transport and Logistics said it has 100,000 EVs in just the first 2 years of the program. So basically what happened is, as a national priority, Ethiopia has basically almost banned import of used gasoline or diesel-powered cars. And they've made it very easy to import electric vehicles, tax-free, with subsidies, whatever. And the result of that is that they have been seeing huge sales in electric vehicles, which is exactly what they want. And they want to power those vehicles using local energy. They want those vehicles to be cheaper, to have less in the way of emissions, and so forth and so forth. So they've been very successful in that. Now, we have a picture of the Echo Hudson. This is from Clean Technica. Put that up. This is Echo Hudson, which is an Ørsted vessel. The title here is First Ever American-Built Offshore Wind Service Operations Vessel. And that's it. What you're seeing there is an American-built wind service operations vessel. Now, we have almost nothing in the way of wind service, wind farms in the United States. I don't know how many turbines are up, but a year ago it was just 7. The synopsis of this article says, America's first offshore energy supply chain is marking a milestone with the launch of the first wind service operations vessel owned and crewed by Americans. It will play a key role in enabling domestic energy production and strengthening America's energy independence. And basically what's happening here is there are rules, there are laws that say that if you're going to be transporting something from the United States to another part of the United States, it has to be done by an American vessel. And an American vessel means built in the United States, crewed by Americans, owned by the United States, and so forth and so forth. And the law that is behind this has been slowing down our ability to install wind turbines offshore. And so this is this vessel that you can see here is addressing that. Ørsted built a vessel for an American wind service organization in order to be able to maintain wind turbines in the United States offshore. We are up to Tuesday, May 14th. We have a picture of transmission lines. I don't know where the color on this came from, but there it is. Given the color that you see there, should it be a surprise that this particular story came from Canary Media? The title of the story is Landmark Transmission Reform Could Dramatically Speed U.S. Energy Transition. Okay, FERC, F-E-R-C, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, issued a sweeping reform to transmission grid planning, one that proponents say is a major, much-needed win for the effort to transition the country's power sector away from fossil fuels. I feel like writing an article about this because we have a huge amount of, we have a huge backlog of renewable energy waiting to be installed. And the capacity of the backlog that we have is something like 2.5 times the total capacity in the United States that is in use now. Having said that, we have to bear in mind that the capacity of a wind farm, a solar farm, or whatever, is not as good as at projecting. It's a number that is not as useful for projecting what that site will produce because of the capacity factor. A nuclear plant is probably going to be producing electricity 92% of the time. A solar plant might be producing electricity 20% of the time, and you have to take that into account. Nevertheless, we've got a huge amount of capacity that is waiting to be installed, and it can't be installed because the electricity that it produces is not going to have any place to go because transmission lines have to be installed. And it reminds me that years ago I talked to a fellow who was putting in solar capacity, and it had to be, the energy coming out of it had to be transmitted maybe 100 miles, maybe 200 miles, however far it was significant distance. And so he was putting in batteries at the solar plant. The fact that the batteries are put in at the solar plant means that that solar plant can operate a large number of hours in the day, basically as a baseload power plant. When it's producing more capacity than the transmission lines can carry, more electricity, that electricity is used to charge the batteries. When it's producing less, the batteries are used to bring the amount up so that to the capacity of the lines, so that the restriction there is the lines. Now, if that battery were someplace else, the solar plant would only be able to transmit up to the amount of money, the amount of electricity for the lines, and that would mean that to get the electricity out of the generating plant to wherever it's needed, new transmission lines would have to be put in. And the person who was talking to me said, as huge as the battery was that they were talking about, it would be more expensive to increase the transmission lines so that all of the electricity from the solar project could be transmitted. And it would not have a huge positive effect. So these things, they all have to be taken into account. This is not simple. That's the point that I'm trying to make. This is not just a simple thing. Okay, we have an article coming up from Clean Technica. And here we have a picture of a man working at EV battery production. The title of the story is European-made batteries could be 60% less carbon intensive than Chinese, according to analysis. Onshoring the EV supply chain to Europe would cut emissions of producing a battery by 37% compared to China-controlled supply chain, analysis by T&E shows. Thus, this carbon saving rises to over 60% when renewable electricity is used. So if you just change the supply chain, that'll give you 37%. But when you, in addition to that, specify that it must be renewable energy supplying the work that you're doing, it goes up to 60%, as opposed to letting these things be made in China and then shipping them to Europe. Okay, now we have an article from Cape Cod Times and a picture of the Cape Cod Canal train bridge. Cape Cod Canal site gets federal okay to test water-powered turbines. Cape Codders and Islanders, that's Islanders referring to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket and other islands, but mostly those two, know about harnessing offshore wind power to create renewable energy. Now Cape Cod may be on the cusp of being a national trailblazer for another green technology, one that uses the power of the ocean tides to make electricity. Now, what's being done here is not what you might think. It's not offshore wind power. Offshore wind power is not the only thing that's going on for Cape Cod and the islands. In this particular case, the Cape Cod Canal, which connects Cape Cod Bay with the area south of Massachusetts in the Atlantic. As the tide changes, there is a flow through the Cape Cod Canal that is appreciable. In fact, it's fairly strong. And what they're doing is trying to make electric power out of that change out of that tidal flow. So there are various ways to do that, and they're trying them out to see if they can just say, okay, we're going to get electricity from Cape Cod Canal. Okay, we are at Wednesday, May 15th. I have a picture here of contrails, and by the way, I am almost 100% certain that those are, in fact, contrails, not chemtrails. And the reason I say that is because these, the trails themselves don't go up to the plane. They go up to a place that is almost the length of the plane behind the engines. So steam that is coming out invisibly from the engines is condensing into a cloud considerably after. If there were something being distributed from the plane, a solid, you would be able to see it going all the way up to the plane, at least if it was in any quantity. But anyway, that is contrails. It says it's contrails, and I believe it is. This is from The Guardian, and the title is Magical Thinking, Hopes for Sustainable Jet Fuel Are Not Realistic. There is currently, quote, no realistic or scalable alternative, end quote, to standard kerosene-based jet fuels, and the touted, quote, sustainable aviation fuels, end quote, are well off track to replace them in a time frame needed to avert dangerous climate change, according to a report by the Institute for Policy Studies. So basically what they're saying is we have to do something else. We can't just take donut oil and use it for making fuel for jet planes. Maybe there isn't enough, and that's a very real consideration. But the fact is we're burning fuel for these jet planes very fast. The cost in terms of the carbon footprint for getting a plane from one place to another, a jet plane fueled by jet fuel. There are planes that are called jet planes that are electric, and they have very different characteristics and should not be part of this discussion, really. But if you want to fly from Boston to Paris or something like that on a jet plane, you're going to be flying on a plane that burns something that's very similar to kerosene. And that is going to have a carbon footprint that is very big. So that is something to consider. Our next item, we have a couple of wind turbines. These are offshore wind turbines. The person whose name is there is Markel Strauss, and that funny character at the end of the name Strauss is a German character called Eszett. In terms of the way that it's, if you want to replace it with standard Roman characters, it is SS. If you, the name Eszett indicates that it's SZ, but it is not an uppercase B, so let's not call it that. This is from The Guardian also. And the title of this article is Trump pledges to scrap offshore wind projects on day one of presidency. Now, I think he's making an offer here that he will not be able to fulfill. I don't think the president can just say, we're not going to have these projects continue. There are contracts involved, and you can't ditch a contract just because the president of the United States doesn't like it. Nevertheless, this is what Donald Trump is planning on doing, and I don't think he's going to get much in the way of votes for this. People are concerned about climate change, as I think, well, they should be. And when he says that wind turbines go round and round and go row, 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 it's not helpful. Also, he's got a thing about wind turbines. There are a number of people, not a lot of people, but a number of people have a thing about wind turbines. And looking at why they have a thing about wind turbines, what causes it, and so forth, is illuminating, let me put it that way. 12 years ago, I started my blog up. There were unanswered questions about human health effects of wind farms. And in the first year that I was doing my blog, I saw those unanswered questions getting answered in Australia. In those days, they had the Wabraw Foundation, which had sought to protect Wabraw from the dangers of wind farms. And there was a woman, I can't remember her name, who was, she was a pediatrician who was working on such things, and they were creating quite a ruckus. And I remember seeing probably a dozen articles all appear the same day saying that 20 some odd percent, I'll say a quarter, of all of the wind farms in Australia had significantly increased numbers of human symptoms around them. That's important. It means that these wind farms had increased human symptoms, and statistically significant means that they it was probably not an accident that had caused this. And I knew that there was going to be a lot of scientific study looking at why that was the case. The other part of this that was much more interesting to me, or as interesting, was that 2/3 of the wind farms had no increase. And when you consider these things, the numbers that are involved, that means possibly 2/3 of them had decreases. So why would you have increases in one and decreases in the other? And eventually the scientists looked at everything you could possibly imagine, but they finally came to the conclusion that the difference was in the stress that was placed on people near wind turbines by anti-wind activists. And that is the official position, or it was 12 years ago, the official position of the Australian Medical Association. And the anti-wind activists in Australia stopped succeeding. They're still going. They are still going. The Wabraw Foundation, from what I can gather, still exists. But they're not succeeding because they cannot show that what they're trying to prevent in these symptoms is in fact happening because of wind turbines. All right, let me continue. I'm going to go on. This is the base of a wind tower, offshore wind tower. And this article is from Renews. The title is Maryland Signs New Offshore Wind Law. The state of Maryland has signed new legislation aimed at keeping the state's offshore wind goals on track. The law allows qualified offshore wind developers to apply for outstanding offshore renewable energy credits created as a result of changes in the market and to add additional capacity to existing projects. And basically what this is saying is Maryland is pursuing offshore wind farms, trying to get them installed, trying to get them hooked up, trying to get them onto the grid to supply power. And they're not kidding. I should point something out here about offshore wind farms. Wind power generally has a capacity factor in the range of, I'm going to say 30 to 35%. Offshore wind power has a capacity factor that is much higher, and some offshore wind farms actually have capacity factors that are above 50%. Now, compare that with coal. It used to be in the old days that coal facilities in the United States had capacity factors of around 80%. Some of them have had their capacity factors fall below 50%. There are offshore wind farms that have higher capacity factors than existing coal plants. And this is something that makes these wind farms attractive for producing electricity. And when they're paid down, the electricity that comes from them is not terribly expensive. So this is a realistic approach to the marketplace. Now, we have one more slide, which is a wish for all the viewers. Have a sensationally tranquil week. I'm not sure what sensationally tranquil means, but I kind of get a good feeling about it. Anyway, I'm going to say have a good week, have a sensationally tranquil week. If Tom were here, he would say, y'all come back now, you hear? And he would wave, I'm waving, and his cat would wave if you could get a picture of it. So there we are with the show, and I really hope you come back next time. And in the meantime, have a sensationally tranquil week. Bye-bye.